Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Baumgarten, but I expect you already know that. And I welcome you to this discussion on Facebook, paltalk.com, and on YouTube. The pandemic, why do I always start my shows with the same statement? The pandemic has affected us all in ways we could never have imagined. I think if you go back and look at the archive of every show that I've done, I've almost every one of them started with those words, but they're true. And as a result, there are things that keep coming out. It's sort of like after 9/11. It's been years since 9/11, and I'm still hearing stories about things that happened on that fateful day that I was unaware of, even though I was there covering it on the ground. And so, because there's so much happening, you can only see what you see. You can't see what you can't see. So, what I've learned is that just as I have taken to doing my interviews online, book tours are now about to go online, and they have been going online. And I'm so pleased to have as my guest today, Tom Dreesen. You know him from the Letterman show. You may know him if you're old enough. For the 13 years, the comedian and MC extraordinaire was the opening act for Frank Sinatra. He has a new book out about all of that. It's called Still Standing: My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra, available on Amazon and I guess at Barnes and Noble if you can find one that's open or online. Tommy Dreesen, I'm so excited and pleased to have you with me on this discussion on Facebook Live, paltalk.com, and on YouTube.
Thank you, Gary. It's been an unusual experience. Years ago, I had a book out called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white, about Tim Reed and I being America's first black and white comedy team. And so we went on a book tour. You know, you fly into a city and you go to bookstores and you sign books and you talk to people and then you get in the next city. Now I'm doing that here in my home. I'm going from city to city in bookstores, doing these Zoom broadcasts. I'm doing 3 and 4 a day. And it's really interesting. If anything positive could possibly come out of the pandemic, is that I'm not flying all over the country wearing myself out from city to city. I'm sitting here at home wearing myself out.
But do you still have the interaction? Do you still have the interaction with the readers when you do that?
Oh, it's really interesting. Yesterday I did a bookstore in New Hampshire, and the people could ask me questions. You know, and I did one a while back where they showed the question streamlined underneath the the graphic on the ground below the computer. It was really kind of interesting and fun talking to people from all of the United States who have read the book, who want to read the book, and then asking me questions. You know.
The only bad part is I can't get the author to sign the book for me.
Well, yes, you can. I mean, here's how you do it. My publisher sent me book plates. So the bookstore said that all the customers that wanted a book that I would personally autograph it. Now he's going to send me all the names, and I, with one envelope, I can sign, to Gary, to Larry, to Mo and Curly, and send a book plate to them, and they can tack it right, right inside the book cover,
So the title of the book really tells it all. You don't have to read the book. All you have to do is read the title. I'm kidding. The title is Still Standing: My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. And that's exactly Tom Dreesen's life story, because you came from an impoverished background to hanging out as a close confidant of the chairman of the board. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, this is a book about that journey. That little boy, I had 8 brothers and sisters, lived in a shack on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. I had 8 brothers and sisters, very poor. We lived in a shack. If a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. Rat-infested, roach-infested shack. If you had holes in your shoes, you put cardboard in it. And at 8 years old, I started a bar in my neighborhood with my shoe shine box, shining shoes to help money to help feed my brothers and sisters. On all these jukeboxes, in every bar I was in, Frank Sinatra was singing. And so the book is basically the journey from this little boy hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox while he's shining shoes in bars to one day carrying Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. And it's that journey and all the things that happen in between, the ups and downs, you know, the heartaches, the you know, the being knocked down, the title is still standing. I was knocked down physically. When you read the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. Knocked down physically, and then also knocked down literally, I mean, you know, personally in your career. And I kept getting back up. And I've been a stand-up comedian for 50 years now. And where that 50 years took me, the ups and downs, the heartaches, you know, but I'm still standing, and it's triumphant in the end, you know.
Well, you know, as we get older, and I've been a reporter for just as long as you've been a comedian, and if you just got to keep working. There are a lot of people saying, when are you gonna, you know, hang out, hang out at the fishing hole with? That's not me. I've got to keep working. That's what keeps me vital, and I can see that that works for you as well.
I got to tell you, whenever people ask me about when you're going to lay it down, I always tell this story. Years ago, I was doing the Dean Martin roast and all those things, and I was in Lake Tahoe, the hotel with Sammy Davis at the time, and George Burns was next door at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And I had done the Dean Martin roast, roasting George Burns, and I knew him before that and liked him. He was a wonderful man. So I rushed over to catch his show one night, and here he was, 95 years old. He didn't run out to the microphone, but when he got out there, he did a good hour and 10 minutes. And when he got done, I went backstage, and I walked into his dressing room, and he was looking at some 3x5 cards. And he was looking down at them, and I said, George, really good show tonight. He said, oh, thank you, Tommy. He was looking at the notes. He said, I was working on some new material tonight. I said to myself, that's what I want to be. I want to be 95 years old working on some new material.
Yeah, exactly. So I know this story. Probably a lot of the audience don't know that you were at the Comedy Store, I think was the name of the club. And there was a talent scout for the Tonight Show who was there and who caught your act, who said, come on the show. That was your big break.
Well, in your career, there's many breaks, but that truly was at that time. I had been with the comedy team for 6 years, as I said previously. Tim Dreesen and I were his first black and white comedy team in history. Shows we were the last. That's part of my book too. Part of Still Standing, telling that story and that journey. When the team split up, it broke my heart. I mean, I thought I had never been on stage alone, you know, and I had to, change my career around to become a stand-up comedian. My wife wanted me out of show business. My ex-wife at that time, I forgot her name. Oh yeah, Plaintiff. Anyhow, she said, she wanted me to quit the business, and get a job in the factory like her dad had. And I don't blame her. When I married her, I just came out of the service and I was working a regular job. She did not like show business as precarious business that you rarely get paid and struggle, but it was my dream. I had a wife and 3 kids the day I went in show business. So after the comedy team split up, I ended up on the West Coast in 1975. Wherever you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you hadn't been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you might want to be a comedian. You might going to be one, but you weren't one now. There were no comedy clubs, none in America, So now the Comedy Store was on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and it was the most electric place you could be at that time for comedians. Comedians migrated from all over the country to come to the West Coast because Johnny Carson had been in New York. In 1972, the Tonight Show, he moved to the West Coast. And one appearance, Freddie Prinze did one appearance on the Tonight Show. He got a sitcom the next day. So the buzz was out. One appearance on the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson show. 26 million people watch that show every night. So I went out there. I ended up broke an abandoned car. An old Nash Rambler with a front seat went down. I got a wife and 3 kids back in Chicago, but I'm on my rear end. I'm living on $1 a day every night at like 6 o'clock at night. I would go to Kentucky Colonel. They had a thing called corn and cluck for under $1, 99 cents for 2, some corn on the cob and some mashed potatoes and coleslaw. And that's what I lived on. So I just struggled. But I tried to get on at the Comedy Store. It took me 30 days to get an audition with Mitzi, the owner of the Comedy Store. Finally, I got an audition and the pressure was on because if you don't, it's over. Because that was the
Oh boy, we have lost Tommy Dreesen. I can see him frozen, but I cannot hear him. Oh, This is a disaster, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe he will try to rejoin us. I'm hoping he does. I think I can there, he just disappeared. He just disappeared on us completely. Let's give him a chance to rejoin. And by the way, I understand that when I'm typing in that little field telling you who my guest is on Facebook, I misspelled Tom Dreesen's name. Is that true? Well, we'll resolve that if I can edit that afterwards. That's kind of embarrassing. The name of his book, as I am treading water and hoping for his return, is Still Standing: My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. Boy, we're just getting into it. He was at the Comedy Store. That was the place to be. He was hoping that he would do well and maybe get picked up on the Tonight Show, and that would make his career. We were sitting there on the edge of our seats in anticipation of what comes next, and poof, the technology got the best of him. And isn't it funny that that would happen, since the whole premise of the interview was that he's doing his book tour electronically. He's not traveling the country. He's doing it exactly the way we're doing this here. And I guess his connection was probably still is not so good, because I'm talking very slowly in hopes that he returns, but he has not as of yet. Well, we got a taste of it. Anybody who ever saw Tom opening for Sinatra for 13 years, or all the times he was on the Tonight Show, and when David Letterman inherited the Tonight Show, he loved Dreesen so much that he made him his substitute host. There he is right now calling me. Let's see what he has to say. Tom, we lost you on Zoom.
Yeah, Gary, you know what? I'm going to try something here. I don't know whether it's my Wi-Fi connection here. I'm going to try to hook up a different Wi-Fi system from one end of the building to the other.
Okay.
If I hook it up, can we start all over?
Well, we'll just pick it up. I'm still on live, and I'm treading water, hoping for your return. You know, I think your name is Dreesen. It's not Schwarzenegger, but I guess you'll be back if all goes well.
Let me try something. I'll try to get right back to you.
All right, no problems.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, could you guys hear that, by the way? Should I interview him by phone? We've had terrible success doing it by phone, and everybody wants to see the guest, you know? So I don't know whether, I guess if all else fails, we could complete the interview by telephone and see how that sounds. You can hear him well, I'm hearing. Okay, well, let's give him the opportunity to try to connect with the new Wi-Fi and see if we can pick up Tom Dreesen, because I know you all want to hear what he has to say. You're probably tired of looking at my mug. I have nothing interesting to say. I will tell you this. I've done the 4th edition of my podcast. You might ask, Gary, why are you doing podcasts? You've got your Facebook, you got your Pal Talk, you got your YouTube, you got your job. I'll tell you, on the podcast, I kind of let off steam. Look, it's a lot cheaper than going to a therapist. So today I'm spouting off about, I'm fixing my collar. I get a little self-conscious when I see myself in the on the screen here. Normally, I'm totally non-self-conscious. Anyways, I'm unconscious. My podcast today is about 10 minutes long. It's about these kids in Georgia who were suspended for publishing a photograph and I'm trying to add him to the show. Invite. No, I see. It says 2 participants. Waiting, admit. There we go. Tom, I think you're back. Let's see. Yes, you are. Bravo. But your timing's horrible. While I was treading water, I was promoting my podcast. It's the Gary Baumgarten Report. It's on Spotify and other platforms wherever you listen to your podcast. Okay, shameless self-plug is over. So you're at the Comedy Store. You're nervous as all get out because this is make it or break it time. You're either going to head back to your Rambler Nash and either sleep in it or drive back to Chicago with your tail between your legs, or maybe, God willing, lightning will strike and you'll get picked up by the Tonight Show.
Yes, and so I finally became a regular at the Comedy Store, and I start, hounding this talent coordinator from the Tonight Show named Craig Tennis. And finally, he came to see me. And that night, he was looking at 3 acts of a comedy team called Baum and Eston. Bruce Baum was still out there doing it. Larry Eston went on to write for Cheers. And a new kid named Billy Crystal and me. I don't know whatever happened to Billy Crystal, but
I don't know. I never heard that name before.
I'm doing the Gary Baumgarten show, so he,
who's Billy Crystal when you're with me, you know?
Anyhow, so that night they came, and anyhow, I did a 20-minute set. He took me outside. He said, okay, come to my office next Tuesday. And I went to his office. He said, okay, show me the 5 minutes you would do. I saw you do 20 minutes. So I stood at his desk and I told him this routine, that routine. He said, take that line out, put this line in. Okay, Bob. Now, long story short, I end up, you're on next Tuesday, a week away. I'm so excited. 26 million people watch that show. Talent coordinators watch that show. You know, everybody in the country in those days was discovered from that show. And I'm on my rear end financially. So anyhow, I finally get there Tuesday. I get in makeup. They take me up to your dressing room. They bring you down to the green room, and you're getting ready to go on. They came in the green room and said, "We ran out of time. You're bumped. You got to come back next week." So I came back the next week. I was in makeup, went up to my dressing room, back down to the green room, waiting. They came and said, "We ran out of time. We bumped you." 3 times in a row, they did that to me. The 4th time I'm there, I'm in makeup. Fred DeCordova, the producer, comes in the the makeup room. And he said to me, "I got bad news for you." I said, "What?" He said, "You're going on tonight."
He was a comedian too.
Yeah, right. But meanwhile, now the pressure, you're waiting. Bert Convy was on the show that night with Carol Burnett. And Carol was making people laugh. And then Bert was singing a song and they came and got me and said, "You follow the song." Now, when you're a veteran of the Tonight Show, as I became later, when you're walking backstage, all the stagehands say, "Hey, Dreesen, how's your Cubs? Hey, how's everybody in Chicago?" Or whatever they would say. That first time they see you coming with the talent coordinator and they turn around and they whisper, "It's his first time. It's his first time." And because the pressure is enormous. Now they put you behind the curtain. They're in commercial break. Doc Severinson's playing because they're in commercial break and it's all dark back there. And the coordinator said, "Are you all right?" And you say, "Yeah." And he walks away. Now you're pacing and you're talking to God one-on-one. Oh God, geez, what was that first line again? Oh yeah, now and what happens is that you're thinking, not only is this the biggest break in your career, but my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. So if I bomb, I can't even go back home, you know. So, now, the music stops and your heart stops and all the lights, you see them all lighting up because they're coming back live. And you hear Johnny saying, "We're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on the Tonight Show." That one line, "I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight." That line sets the audience up for you. "Welcome, Tom Dreesen." They open up the curtain and you walk out there and it's bright lights. You can't see the audience. You hit your mark on the floor. They're applauding and you get that first joke out and it got a laugh. Then I did the second joke and it got a laugh. Then I did the third joke, it got applause. And I did the 4th joke and Johnny and Ed McMahon are laughing behind me. Now I'm on a roll. I ended up getting 8 applause, said goodnight. I said, "This has been my first appearance on the Tonight Show. You're a wonderful audience and show business is a tough life. So if you liked me, just if you liked me and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please? And I walked through the curtain, and the coordinator come running around, the people up on. He said, go back, go back. I said, go back and talk to Johnny. He said, no, 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 just go back. So I went through the curtain, and they kept applauding, and Johnny did that little circle with his fingers. He went like this, and I went back to the curtain, and everybody was applauding me and grabbing me, the coordinator. I never stopped working. I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show after that, but I never stopped working from that night. God bless you, Johnny Carson.
And how long was it before he invited you to actually sit down on the couch?
On my third appearance, which is a very good point. You're from that era, so you remember. In those days, if you appeared on The Tonight Show one time, to America, you had arrived. But to my industry, you had not arrived, to show business, till you sat down and talked to Johnny. That was the stamp when you talked to Johnny. And on the third time there, he invited me over to sit and talk to him. And then from that point on, that's you know. So I did 61 appearances on the show. And as you mentioned, David Letterman, I did over 50 on his show. And thank God to him. He's a good buddy of mine. We started at the Comedy Store at that time. The night I did my first appearance on The Tonight Show, David was at the Comedy Store in the kitchen area watching me on TV.
Wow.
And he had not done the show at all at that time. He was new out there, you know.
When you were taking your little sabbatical from our interview, and by the way, there are not many guys that would tread water like for as I did for you, but it was well worth it, as my audience has seen. And they're glad that I shut up and you started talking, if you want to know the truth. You're pixelating on me. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Well, they can still hear you anyway. Tell me how you and Sinatra ended up hooking up.
I after I did my first appearance on The Tonight Show, I was doing, I toured with Sammy Davis for 3 years. I was touring with Gladys Knight and Pips, Natalie Cole, and I toured with Smokey Robinson for years. And I was touring all around the country and still doing Tonight Shows and all the other shows. And I was appearing in Lake Tahoe with Smokey Robinson at Caesars, and Frank Sinatra was next door at Harris. And I was always a fan, and I wanted to see him. So after my show one night, I didn't change out of my stage clothes, and I ran over to Harris Hotel, which was 2 doors away. And I was running into the showroom when the vice president of Harris Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, a very powerful guy, he saw me running into the showroom, and he was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. So he called me, he said, Tommy, come here, come here. And I went over, and it was, he said, this is Mickey Rudin. And I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. And he said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. And I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face, like he heard that a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he said, he looked at me, he said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? And I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000?
Boom.
He started laughing, and he said, I like this kid. And a week later, they called me and said, would you like to do 1 week with Frank Sinatra at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City? And I thought, yeah, sure. I'll try to get my picture taken with him and hang at every bar back in Chicago,
Right.
And the second night I was with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. And I can remember like it was yesterday. I was sitting there across from him, and he was eating dinner. He set his knife and his fork down, and he looked at me and he said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, yeah. And it turned into almost 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, all over the United States, and staying at his home 6, 7 times a year, and a friendship that I shall always treasure. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral.
Well, when you look at the photographs behind you, you see that everybody wears a tux around Frank Sinatra. It was a different time than it is today. The way the entertainment, there was a class, there was a style that he demanded, wasn't there?
Well, I once said to him, Gary, I said, you know what, because when I toured with Sammy Davis, when you appear with a star, you're the opening act. It's their audience. So they can dictate some policy. I would say to Sammy, how do you want me to dress? He said, Tommy, we should dress at least as good as those who came to see us. Now, in Vegas in those days, the dinner show, people wore jacket and a tie in those days. Second show, you could be casual. But with Frank Sinatra, when I toured with him, it was always a tuxedo. And I said to him one time, I said, why do we wear tuxedos? The only night we didn't wear a tuxedo, when we were casinos, Vegas, Tahoe, Reno, Atlantic City, we wore a tuxedo every night except closing night. We'd wear a suit, and we'd bolt to the private jet with the suit and tie on. But we always wore a tuxedo. And I said to Frank one time, why do we wear tuxedos? He said, Tommy, if we were going to do a show for the king and the queen, royalty, would we wear a tuxedo? I said, yeah, of course. He said, okay, that garage mechanic in Detroit and his wife, who's a waitress, who work all year long to save just enough money to buy 2 tickets to our show. They're just as much royalty as the king and the queen. And we dress for them the same way we dress for the king and the queen. Every night is a command performance. And that was his policy.
And I think that's why so many people look affectionately, fondly back on that era and Frank Sinatra and you and the Rat Pack and all of that, because you treated your audience with respect. You didn't look down on your audience. Today, the comedy, it's got to drive you a little crazy, the way the comedy has turned, where it's biting, it's profane, and I don't have a problem with profanity, but you almost have to drop the F-bomb. It's expected, and before it was expected that you would not.
You want to hear something funny? I was trying out some new material at the Laugh Factory a while back here in Hollywood. And I was upstairs waiting to go on, and around the corner were 2 young comedians who didn't know that I was there. And I heard them talking, and they mentioned my name, and so my ears perked up. One of them said, you know, Tom Dreesen is here. And the other young comedian said, yeah, he's old school. And the other kid said, what do you mean he's old school? He said, well, he doesn't use the F word. And the other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives? And I stuck my head around the corner and I said, adjectives. That's what I use for adjectives.
Yes. That's very, very funny. Before I let you go, I want you to give us some insight into the person behind that golden voice. What would be the biggest takeaway that you could give the audience about the man, not the performer, the man, Frank Sinatra?
Well, you know, he was a complex guy who grew up in Hoboken. One of the reasons we got along so well, I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. And he came from the streets. You know, neither one of us went to college. I went to junior college nights studying the political science of all things, but we were 2 street guys. He was the great Frank Sinatra with this extraordinary talent. It's hard to forget about. He was the greatest pop singer of all time. This is a man who won the Academy Award and never took an acting lesson. I once asked him in front of Gregory Peck, did you ever study acting? And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm and said, acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough you don't fool with. He danced with Gene Kelly, for God's sake. This was an enormous talent who had been knocked down and got back up again, you know. So when you're alone with him, we would ride around the desert till dawn. He never went to bed till the sun came up, whether we were on the road or off the road. So when I stayed at his home, he would come and get me out of my bungalow sometimes and say, Tommy, let's take a ride. And we would ride around the desert till the sun came up. And toward the end of his life, he began to open up even more about his childhood and about his mom and his dad. And he was a complex guy who had this incredible fame and fortune, and still 5 minutes before he went on stage, you would have thought it was his first appearance on the stage. He would pace. And then he would walk out on that stage and 20,000 people would rise to their feet. We appeared in arenas in Hawaii in front of 40,000 people outdoors. But the moment he wouldn't even get to the microphone and he'd have a standing ovation. And the cheers before he created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people have at their whole act. This was a tremendous responsibility on this man, more than you'll ever know. But that light would hit him and 20 years would fall off of his face and he would be young again, you know.
Is it true that he didn't like being alone, that when he went out to dinner, he always had to have people around him? And does that play a little bit into what you just said, that anecdote about why he would knock on your bungalow door and say, Tommy, let's go for a ride? He just didn't like being alone?
I'm not so sure that he didn't like being alone. He loved company. And you know, that's the other thing we had in common. I'm a Chicago guy. I live in LA, but we love to hang out. You know, Chicago people love to hang out and tell stories, you know, and after the show, there's nothing we like better than after the show to go hang out in some restaurant in New York, like Apache's on 57th Street or something, and just hang out and tell stories. You know, Frank loved that kind of company and that kind of camaraderie. By the way, that's one of the things I picked up on him when I first started touring with him. I was a veteran at that time. I was doing a lot of shows. I'd been around, but I picked up this guy didn't need another fan. He had millions of fans. he wanted a buddy. So he never knew how much in awe of him I was, because I would never let him see that side of me. You know, I was like any other person that was a Sinatra fan, like, whoa, do you see what you just did, or that show there, or that song, or that movie you were in? And I never did that to him. So he was hanging out with a buddy, and he never treated me like anything but a peer, you know, which astounded me, because he never was condescending to me at all, you know. And by the way, everybody I ever took backstage with him, this is an insight to the man that you asked about. In the 14 years I toured with him, I took nuns backstage. I took the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee and U.S. senators and heads of corporations, but I also took people from my neighborhood, a bartender, a guy who drove a bread truck. And Frank he never refused any of my guests, and he treated everybody good, but he treated, if you will, the little guy a little more special. He would say, you drive a bread truck. Now, do you have the Italian bread? What kind of bread? He would make that little guy walk out of there feeling like he was on top of the world. He had that special way about him. And in closing with your thing, that when I had to speak at his funeral, I made up my mind that I didn't want to cry, because I loved this man, but I didn't want to cry. I could hear him in my brain. Every night before I'd go on stage, he'd say, Tommy, you going on? And I'd say, yeah. He'd say, be funny and be brief. He would always say that to me. So I made up my mind I wasn't going to cry. And I told a funny story, and I was proud of myself, and that I didn't break down. Just a quick story. I once said to him, he said, Tommy, Sicilians don't cry, they cry alone. Now I'm half Sicilian and I'm half Irish. He said, Sicilians cry alone. I said, but I'm half Irish. He said, well, Irish cry when they change bus drivers, you know.
Exactly. They wear their emotions on their sleeve, no question.
So now I prided myself, I got through that, and now I'm carrying his coffin out of the church. And as we got outside, you know, inside was everybody who's who that ever was in our business or even beyond our business. But outside were all the people who couldn't get in, his fans. And they cheered and they screamed and loud, long live Frank Sinatra. We love you, Frank. God bless you, Frank. Thank you. Your music is the soundtrack of my life. We love you. All those cheers. And that's when I lost it. Putting the hearse inside the coffin, tears just flowed down my face, because I know that would have pleased him so much. That he was just a man he was a kid from Hoboken.
What a lovely story. I really appreciate you. I mean, it was a very real interview, and I appreciate it. The name of the book, ladies and gentlemen, is called Still Standing, My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. Tom Dreesen. I will, for those of you who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, put a link to the Amazon so you can click on it and buy it right now. And hey, when this is all over and you're doing stand-up out here in New York, I'm going to come and see you.
I appreciate it, but you know what, Gary, no comps. You're going to have to pay.
It's okay. That's okay. Thanks, buddy. And everybody have a good weekend. Stay safe. And as I like to say at the end of our discussions like this, peace out.